Peru and I have been friends for a while. We've conversed about stories and storytelling. I've participated in her wonderful story challenges that she periodically puts up for free, just to invite people in to say, hey, come learn about storytelling. So today we're going to tap into her wisdom, and we're going to kind of do it in interview format. Well, I'll see if I can lead the discussion and coax some nuggets out of Peru. So
good. I got a hard stop at 10:30. So I want to turn my camera off. You guys flow with it.
Okay, that's fine. Peru, how would you describe the power of a story?
How would I describe the power of story? The power of a story is all about connecting with other human beings. There is a lot of information out there, especially in the world that we currently live, Steve. So much information is available at the click of a mouse, but not enough connection is available. Through stories, we not only are able to inform our audience in a more powerful way, but we are also able to connect with them. So when we want our audience to take a particular action, whether it is on an idea, whether we are trying to sell something, they are able to connect with us and they are able to absorb that information more powerfully and take the action that we want them to take. So if we are putting content out for the purpose of building our business, then it is a great idea to use storytelling when you do that.
Okay, so I would add to that, Peru, that behind that connection aspect, there are some scientific studies around how stories increase the oxytocin in your brain, which ultimately results in somebody feeling a deeper connection to you, and also results in people trusting you and are more likely to do maybe what you suggest for them to do.
Yeah.
And other studies that talk about, putting something in a story makes it 22 times more memorable than just giving facts.
Yes.
And so those are the things that are behind the power of story. When we talk about the power of story, it's easy to see the front end of it, which is the social aspect of connecting, because that's engineered in us from way back from caveman days, where
Yes.
there wasn't any school with books and writing. It was all on a wall, and it was, oh, let me tell you about the great season of the buffalo. And the season of buffalo comes through, and this is what we got to do, and people learned how to live through the stories. And that, I think, is kind of what we're trying to encourage this group to do, is to share the story so you can help people live.
Yeah, that's good.
John, you're doing that with your stories on food that could make a big difference in people's lives. Others are doing it from a business standpoint, which might lead them to a different place.
And Shannon, she is educating people in a space where there's a lot of discomfort because there's a lot of lack of understanding. And so through the story, she's actually educating and enlightening people. It's the edutainment, we call it. So it's really fascinating to see how, stories is being used in so many different ways. Very nice.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I really appreciate that. I never thought I would be on this platform as the LGBT, poster child. It just kind of happened. I think I told you all that before, but it's my business, and I want to change how this group is accepted into workplaces, because we hide into workplaces. 50% of us hide because of discrimination and fear of being passed over for promotions and stuff like that. So I appreciate all of you all's support. It's been like, what, 2 years I've known y'all now? So
Yeah, at least. Yeah,
Steve, like,
yeah.
help me, like, from the very beginning, trying to figure out how to get captions. He spent like over an hour with me on the phone. I was like, this is the sweetest man ever. So y'all have just been a great group of folks. And Parul, I think you're right on target with your storytelling and how important it is. I gotta hop off. I got an appointment, but let's keep it moving, y'all. Great work.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
So Peru, when you talk to people about telling their story, do you have some kind of formula that you introduce to them to say, hey, here's how I suggest you build your story?
Yes, I do have a couple of formulae that I help people with. People who take my story programs, but one of the key things that I can do is, I can share with you, is that always be mindful of what the purpose of your story is and build your story accordingly. So we aren't just telling stories for the heck of it, but we are doing it with a purpose. Here is an example for you. If you are doing storytelling to build a business, then it is a great idea to consider, what is it that you do? How do you do it? And why do you do what you do? Hang all of this information on a common thread and bring it alive, bring it to life through a story. And the story that comes out, consequently, what is it that you do? How do you do what you do? And why do you do what you do? That is really, really powerful. So in my case, the common thread that I look for is one of my core values. And I bring this information forward through stories. So instead of saying facts, that this is who I am and this is what I do, I share that information through story. And the way it works, and the reason why it works so powerfully, is because of the nature of the work that I do. Now, what do I mean by that? As coaches, it is very easy for us to get into a space where we can sound coachy or preachy. And nobody likes being preached to. Nobody likes being coached when they haven't asked for that, that information or that input. But when we share information through storytelling, it becomes interesting and people are more receptive to it, just because we human beings are wired for that information. So I would recommend this structure. It has been used several times. I've used it, my clients use it, and it works.
Gotta unmute here. I got dogs whining in the background. So great. You know, Peru, your point in terms of the purpose aligns with kind of the beginning of the formula that I use when I tell people to tell their stories, which is, you know, what is the message? You know, what is it that you want to communicate? And that's where you start and you build around that message. I think of it not so much in business terms, as you just elucidated quite well. And I love that you've got it in a way that business people can understand and how they can use story to get their business out there. I often think of stories from more life's events and what can we learn from those stories to pass on to others. So for me, you know, I just have a very simple 4-step process. You know, what is the message that you want to communicate? What is the basic context? I call it setting the stage. What are some of those beginning elements to let people know this is the challenge or this is where you're headed? And then really the meat of it is in a sense the struggle. What is it that you were trying to overcome? How is it holding you back? So John, like you had weight you wanted to get rid of. That was your struggle. And so then, you know, to bring that all into a story means that you then close it out by saying, here's the steps I did to overcome. And those steps hopefully, again, reinforce the message that you want to give to the people that you're sharing the story. So, Parul, what do you think of that format, or you want to parallel your format in some way to that?
I love what you said, Steve, because a lot of our stories would talk about a life situation that we have been through. Now, I know that you like to see storytelling as a subcontext of, or as a subset of public speaking, and you bring to life stories from the lives of other people. I take a different view on storytelling. I do that, but because as coaches, we are the biggest brand. We are our personal brand. That is why I say, well, we can share our stories and build our brand, because the more information we share about ourselves, the stronger our brand gets, and we share that information consciously. I would say what you said and what I said, we can club that information. So when we are sharing, why do I do what I do? Let's look at that component.
Yes.
So I talked about the what, the how, and the why. These are three big components. So let's say we are talking about why do you do what you do? You can apply Steve's formula to this. You can talk about the purpose. What is the message you want to share? What was the situation, the event that you're talking about? What was the learning? What was the context? So you can apply that structure to each of these nuggets and then bring it together as a story. So each of those mini stories can follow this structure, and the story as a whole can also follow that structure.
So yes, exactly. I'm right there with you. And one of the reasons I took your class this last week, and at least I have the PDF to go back to, thank you, is to elevate my storytelling from those personal learning stories into business stories. What stories do I want to share that shows my expertise, that shows what I do, and shows what I can do for others? And you're correct about the why. You know, the why has to be throughout all of this, in my opinion, is to, you know, why am I trying to help you solve this pain point? Well, it's because I experience and I know how tough it is. You know, there's that why. How do you do it? Well, here's what I learned to help me do that. And then what, you know, again, you can just talk about the understanding that others can have when you start talking about the pain point and helping them realize that they're not alone, that there are other peoples who have gone through it, and they might be able to help them go through it. So I don't know if you guys can hear the dogs, but the dogs are
just a little bit in the background.
Yeah, they're singing in the background.
Yeah,
they're going through this separation anxiety.
Oh.
One of I've got 3 dogs, and one of them's off to the vet, and when that happens,
oh,
the other ones are like, "Hey, Dylan got to go somewhere." You know.
we're still here.
Yes, exactly. Steve, welcome for joining us.
Thanks.
Parul, at what point would you suggest to people that they start using stories to promote their business?
My response to this question is right now, straight away. wherever you are in your business, whether you are a seasoned business person who has been in the business for a decade or 2 decades or more, or whether you are just starting out, or whether you are thinking of starting out, you are your biggest brand, especially when it comes to a business like coaching, a service-based business. So the more storytelling that you do, and the more you dip into your own life experiences, the easier it'll be for you to establish your credibility in the market and establish yourself as a coach or as a service provider. So there is no perfect time. The perfect time is right now.
Yeah, and I think even within our group last time, Wilton was talking about how just doing a handful of videos had led to him having, I think, potentially three clients out of that. I mean, ultimately, business stories, that's the objective, right? Is how can we connect with people? How can we build that trust? And then, you know, understand their need, and if their needs align with what we're offering, to be able to become that preferred provider for them, that they would come to us and say, hey, Steve, help me out, or Parul, help me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long have you been in the storytelling business?
About 5 years.
So you're a seasoned pro at this.
Well, I've been doing stories for 5 years full time. And I would say, Steve, I have helped people share all kinds of stories. What would people call as, well, let's look at some of the examples of stories that I've helped people share. We have talked about life challenges, for example, life-changing illnesses, talked about homelessness and rebuilding a life after that, talked about addiction and rebuilding a life after that, climbing up a mountain, a story of incest, story of sex work, story of redundancy, story of job loss, story of childlessness, grieving, bereavement, a parent's love for their child, and getting to their mid-30s, mid-40s, and hitting that point and saying, is this all there is to my life? I want something more. And stories about life purpose. These are some examples that come to my mind straight away. So yes, I've had the pleasure and the honor of helping people share all kinds of stories. And they're all amazing. And yes, last week I helped somebody share their story about how they got into the world of seduction. So this lady was talking about the art of seduction, and we brought it out through story.
Yeah, I stayed away from that one. I didn't want my wife coming after me. No. But Peru, if as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to build a business, are there any types of stories that you would say, hey, hold off on these and focus more on those?
So my favorite are personal stories, Steve. And I would say, if you can pick up any of your stories and tie them to the purpose of why you are doing, why you are putting that content out in the world, then that is going to be extremely helpful. So it is not so much about what kind of story, but then it is more about what is the purpose behind it. And everything doesn't have to come back to a pitch. That's not what I'm saying. What we can do is a mix, and rather that's what I recommend. We should do a mix. For example, today the video that I did was about asking for help and recommendations on the bird feeders, and that got different kind of people engaged. People, some of them would normally comment on my posts and some of them don't. But then what I essentially said was, I took my camera to my garden and I said, do you see this tree there? We have lots of avian visitors here in the summer, and I'm planning to put on a bird feeder. Can you give me some recommendations on the food as well as any designs that are good? Any recommendations? And that's all I said. And people started responding, because people like to respond when they are asked for their opinion. And people started talking. So I didn't even talk about my story work and how my program is launching next week. But what happens is, when people engage, a lot of times they would go and click on my profile, and my profile says, my cover picture says that the program is starting, or I have managed to bring people to my profile. And now if they want to give me 2 more minutes, then they can read through the work that I am doing, and we can start having those conversations. So talking about a personal story in the context of building a business doesn't mean that every time we go out and say, buy from me. No, that's not how we do it. But it's about creating that relationship, because we are not just business people, we are people. And what we want to do is we want to establish that connection as one person to another person, and not just as a seller to a prospect. So we are more than our business. That's the message I would want to share with you.
And I think in what I hear you saying, that getting back to that whole intentional purpose of the story, that purpose could change. The story underlying it may not change, but it could change. So for example, I have my cancer story, which I shared in one of the video recently. I can use that story to encourage other people that are going through cancer. I can use that story to talk about resiliency. I can also use that story to talk about leadership and what cancer taught me in terms of leadership. So I would encourage people to, as they look at their stories, to think of the different ways they can use a story, because it's your story, you know it, it's easy for you to tell. It's just a matter of potentially repurposing it and saying, hey, okay, I tell it within this context because I'm talking to a cancer patient. I tell it within this context because I'm talking to a leader. You have any thoughts on that, or you want to add to that?
Yes, I'm with you on that, Steve. And I would say that's a brilliant way to use our story. So a lot of people think that when they need to use their story, or when they respond to the question, what's your story? Which is typically the first question we are asked when we go in as a guest expert, or when we go on a podcast, or we meet somebody new. What's your story? People think that they have to come up with a new story every time, but they don't need to do that. You can have your story prepared, and you can keep it ready, but not get fixated on it. So do the story work and keep it ready. And I would say keep it ready by 70-80%. That's your prepared work. The 20% tweaking comes in based on what is it that you want to achieve, who you are speaking to, what is the purpose, and what is the action you want them to take. So if you take one story, standard story, and run it exactly the same without customizing it to your audience and the purpose, that's when its effectiveness will go down. But you can have that story ready and you can customize it, just the 20%, based on who you are speaking to, what is it that you want them to get out of it, why you are doing what you do, and why you are sharing that story. And that's going to give it a different flavor every single time.
Definitely. John and Steve, do you guys have any questions about, what we've shared here, or storytelling that you would like to ask or throw out?
Let's see. Nothing specific, Steve. I appreciate the reminders about, the reminders, and also kind of the different aspects. I'll say for me, one of the things right now is that I am not building towards a specific business. Okay. To me, I mean, I'll say it's a bigger thing for me than just a business. Now, I will say that I will have talked a couple of times about Green Fair Health, the Green Fair Cafe in Herndon. But again, I don't have a specific business. My goal is to get this information out and raise awareness of this huge problem we have in this country.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Causes become things that we can tell stories on. I've done that with my cancer to try and raise funds for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Paul, I'm sure you've done it with for breast cancer.
Yeah.
Just even if you don't have a business, John, you can think of it as personal branding. You are
Yes.
putting yourself out there for people to get to know you, love
Yep.
you, and want to, hear more from you. Now, one of the things I think you can do uniquely with stories that I have not seen done very much, and Peru, maybe you have, is to turn a story into something visual. With your cooking, you can be telling your story
That
cooking, and it now takes that story to a whole nother level because it's visual.
Yep, and that's one of the things I'll do, Steve. I'll say, my schedule's getting ready to be challenged a little bit because I'm going to be I'm working on. I'll have to go out to Oregon, so I'm going to be.
Yeah,
but we'll.
Once you get out there, you'll be in cloud nine.
But no, I absolutely agree. In fact, I'll say one of my challenges right now is more on the technical side, in incorporating things, because I've played around a little bit, and some of it just comes down to time. And so there's some technical aspects that I'm dealing with. I mean, I think I did incorporate the captions on clips for my last video, and I've got I really like having the music in the background, depending upon what it is I'm talking about.
Music adds to the mood, but I could see you getting like a cheap $20 tripod. You might even be able to get cheaper ones, but just set your camera on it in a place that catches you cooking.
Yeah.
And then, like your last post that I read, the non-oil one.
Yeah.
If you had done that within the context of, I'm going to show you a healthy way to eat without oil.
And that is definitely on my agenda.
So stories can evolve. That's another thing, is as you start to tell a story, you'll realize, maybe I didn't get the message out clearly as I want, and I could do this and make it better.
Yeah.
I'm sure, Peru, you've seen a lot of people like that.
Yeah. And John, what you are doing, it has such a big purpose. And if you can bring in more and more stories into the message that you are sharing, then what you would be doing is you would actually be subtly selling the ideas, which is the cause, the big cause that you're working towards, and helping people be more receptive to the ideas that you are putting forward. Because, hey, I may be talking about storytelling in the context of business, wherein we are selling a product or a service in exchange of money. And what you are doing is you're putting out ideas, and you want people to adopt those ideas. So it's a different kind of selling. We are both salespeople here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we want our audience to take action on what we are putting out. So we are completely aligned there. So you can take everything that applies to storytelling and business and build your brand and have people take action on what you want them to take action on.
Yep.
John,
well, that's my goal. It's one of the reasons I given this a shot.
Well, John, I'm going to I'll DM you a name of somebody that I think you should follow. He's a guy out of Canada. He's Rob Strahan, I think is his name. I'm probably mispronouncing his last name, but
Okay.
he does a lot of videos on wine and beer. And when he does those videos, he often interweaves into them some interesting historical stories. So as you're cooking, think about, oh, hey, where did the onion come from? Where did the tomato come from? What research can you do behind what you're using to pull those types of stories in to make what you're doing even more interesting to the audience?
Uh-huh. Okay.
So you're getting personal training today. For those who,
Yeah. I appreciate it.
you're welcome. Hey, Steve, do you have anything in the background too? I know you've been doing some good storytelling from your heart. And you might just be listening or unable to talk, but hey. Anything else, Peru, you want to say about storytelling?
One of the biggest fears that people have when it comes to sharing their personal story is that a lot of people believe that they don't really have a story to share, or that their story is not extraordinary enough. And why would somebody want to listen to my story? And what I want to say to every person who has that belief is that that's just a myth that you have believed in for such a long time that it has started to appear like a truth to you. Every story is extraordinary. Every story is worthy. Every story is impactful. And there would be somebody in the world who needs to hear exactly what your story is. So go ahead and share your story.